Hello, Mr. Hardy here, and in this video I would like to teach you about Act 4, Scene 2 of Macbeth by William Shakespeare. So as per usual, you need to be familiar with this scene. You may have read it before, listened to it, watched it or studied it in class, and you're using this video for revision or to gain a deeper understanding of what happens in this scene. Once again, I'll start by summarising the key action in this scene. We'll then look at the characters, themes, context, any key quotes and techniques you may want to memorise for your exam, and I'll leave you with an exam-style question you can answer at the end to really put your knowledge to the test. So, what happens in Act 4, Scene 2 of Macbeth? Well, we open the scene in the Macduff Castle, and Lady Macduff explains to Ross, who is a Thane, a Lord of Scotland, that she is confused why her husband Macduff would leave her and his children unprotected in their castle to ride down to England with Malcolm to speak to the King of England and gain an army to come and overthrow Macbeth. She feels that she's been left in a very vulnerable position without a man of the house to protect her and her children. Ross tries to console her, saying that he believes Macduff is doing the right thing, that he's noble, he's wise, he's judicious. Judicious means he makes good decisions. Ross then leaves after comforting Lady Macduff a little bit, and Lady Macduff turns to her son, and they exchange what I would call philosophical witticisms. Philosophy is sort of thinking about the nature of things, why things are what they are, and witticism is when you use wordplay such as puns or jokes to say things in a funny and clever way. So this is, in my opinion, Shakespeare kind of showing off his knowledge of philosophy and his ability to use the English language in a clever way. So he uses philosophy to showcase what he thinks about the world, about human nature, about mankind, and he expresses this through clever use of language and humour and wordplay to really show off his mastery of the English language. So Lady Macduff and her son, they talk about topics like fatherhood, marriage and treachery. I'll go into a little bit more detail towards the end of the video about what they talk about if you are interested in understanding it. A messenger then arrives with news that Lady Macduff and her sons should flee because there is an unwelcome visitor that has broken into the castle. Almost immediately, Macbeth's murderers, the murderers Macbeth has paid to kill Lady Macduff and her sons, arrive, and the son tries to defend his father's honour but ends up being slain. And rather tragically, his final words are for his mother and other siblings to run away. So Lady Macduff and the other children flee, and they are slaughtered, they are killed off stage. Now we know that Macbeth is a tragedy. It's often called the tragedy of Macbeth. And we know that it was based on the form of Greek tragedy, which is a specific type of tragic play. And in Greek tragedy, there is a Greek word, a Greek technique called obscene or skene. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it, but when you translate that into modern English, it's obscene. And basically, things that were obscene are things the audience shouldn't see. So in Greek times, the whole community would come together and watch the play. So if there was things such as a violent murder, that would happen off stage because they wanted to protect the audience from horrific imagery. Or if there was maybe a sexual encounter, that would happen off stage to protect the innocence of the community who were watching the performance. And Shakespeare has employed the same technique here. Graphic scenes such as Macbeth murdering King Duncan happen off stage, obscene. And here the brutal and horrific murder of a innocent children and defenceless woman happens off stage, partly for the protection of the audience, but partly because it allows the audience to create a really intense, horrific image in their head, as opposed to seeing some actors with blunt swords pretend to kill a woman and children on stage. If it happens off stage, the audience could imagine it more intensely if they choose to. And that is what happens in Act 4, Scene 2. So, who are our key characters? Well, the scene opens with Lady Macduff, and she's asking a question. What had he done to make him fly to land? He, in this situation, is her husband Macduff. So she's questioning why her husband has left her and their children to go to England to raise this army against Macbeth. So she is questioning, is her husband's loyalty to the throne stronger than his loyalty to their family? And is that right? Should he love Scotland and the Scottish throne more than he loves and protects his own family, his own flesh and blood? That's something that I think Shakespeare would want the audience to consider. Ross, we know, is a Thane of Scotland, so he serves the king, he serves the throne. He believes Macduff is doing the right thing. He doesn't question Macduff's decision. So clearly he agrees that the Scottish people need help from the English army to overthrow Macbeth and restore peace to Scotland. However, he makes a decision to leave, and this proves very costly, because if he was there, he might have been able to defend against the murderers, but he left, thus leaving Lady Macduff and her children innocent and exposed and vulnerable. Lady Macduff's son, I quite like this character. He's of an undetermined age, so we don't know how old he is, but we assume he's quite young, and we can tell he's quite wise and witty. He exchanges in banter, if you will, with his mother, which I'm sure would have been considered strange at the time, where children were expected to be quite obedient to their parents. But again, he's quite philosophical, he's quite funny, which makes the audience like him, which makes it even more tragic when he's slain on stage at the end of the scene. His mother and other siblings are slayed off stage, obscene. We have a messenger. They don't really do much, they just advance the plot. They tell Lady Macduff and her children that there is someone who has broken into the castle and they should flee, but unfortunately they don't have enough time to flee, and so they are attacked and killed by the murderers. And of course, the last characters to enter the scene are the murderers themselves. They sort of represent evil, particularly Macbeth's evil. It was sort of socially accepted at the time. If you had a problem with someone, you would sort of deal with it man to man, or you'd raise two armies and men would fight against other men. So the killing and the slaying of men was to be expected. With warrior culture, it was what you would call a modus operandi. That's Latin for the normal way of doing things. If you had a problem, men would go and kill each other and sort it out. But when you bring in innocent children and defenceless women, remembering the very clear gender roles at the time, it becomes more personal, and it doesn't become sort of political or ideological. It just becomes downright evil when you start affecting the lives of innocent children and defenceless women. And that's what the murderers do. So they symbolise Macbeth's evil. Thematically, we've got a few themes that resurface in this scene. We have the theme of loyalty. And the question I think Shakespeare is asking us is, what's more important? Is it more important to be loyal to the throne or loyal to your family? And this is a huge question, because at the time in Jacobean England and in 11th century Alba, Scotland, a man was really valued depending on his loyalty to the throne. That would have been seen as his most important characteristic. However, when you get married to someone, you exchange vows, particularly in the Christian tradition. You exchange vows to look after each other till death do you part, in sickness and in health. So actually, now that you're married, should your loyalty be more towards your family? It's quite hard to say. I think Shakespeare would want his audience to be loyal to the throne, because remember, King James I, who was on the throne in the Jacobean era, was experiencing challenges. There was the gunpowder plot, there was assassination attempts on his life. So I think Shakespeare is trying to tell the audience, you've got to be loyal to your king, to your throne. But we also know that Shakespeare and his wife Anne Hathaway were married and loyal to each other until they died. And maybe Shakespeare's actually giving a commentary to society, saying that England would become a more stable place if we showed increased loyalty to our families and protecting the family unit. So I think Shakespeare's thrown out a couple of ideas here, and the audience can interpret it how they will. Treachery. if you're treacherous, you're a traitor, and being a traitor is committing a crime against your king. But what Macduff has done here is he's committed a crime against his family. He's been loyal to his king, so actually Macduff isn't a traitor, in the true sense of the word traitor and treachery, and treason. However, is he a traitor to his family? He has betrayed his wife and his kids and left them unprotected. Is that just as severe a crime as betraying your king? Again, I think Shakespeare's asking us to question that as the audience. We see evil again in this scene. We know Macbeth is a tragedy, so we're going to see lots of evil things happening. But the slaying of innocent children like the son, who we really like, he's witty, he's smart. Ending a life like that, cutting it so tragically short, is just horrible. And the same with defenceless women. In this case, it's Lady Macduff. So the gender roles were very clear. I'll explain a bit more about that in a bit. But you don't slay defenceless women, you just don't kill innocent children. That isn't how things should be done. Back in Alba, Scotland, back in the Jacobean era, and even now, it's just off the cards. And yet Macbeth does it. So this really makes the audience hate the character of Macbeth. And we have these gender roles. Women should be defended by men and not slaughtered by men. And I'll move on to this a bit more in the context. So contextually speaking, this is true in 16th century England, which we can call the Jacobean era, and in 11th century Scotland, which we can call the Alban era. The gender roles were super clear. Men were dominant, they were aggressive, and their job was to protect their family and their king and those around them, and even if it meant laying down their life for them. And the gender roles for women were equally clear and completely the opposite. Women were meant to be obedient instead of dominant. They were meant to listen to the men in their lives, whether that was father or husband. Where men were aggressive, women were valued on their delicacy, their beauty, their gentleness. And where men were to be protectors, women were to accept the protection, to be protected. And these were very clear roles that we see lived up to in this scene. So Lady Macduff was unable to defend herself and protect her children without her husband. And the men, such as Macbeth, he had hired other men in the form of murderers to go and do some aggressive killing. Treason is this idea that you kill the king, and that is the crime of treason, regicide. But could you also be treasonous to your own family? Remembering this sort of Christian idea of exchanging vows and being loyal to your spouse and your family, I think Shakespeare's asking us to question, is Macduff a traitor? Even though he's loyal to the Scottish throne, has he committed the crime of treason, as it were, against his own family? It's a really interesting question to unpick. And the idea of loyalty keeps coming back. Who should you be loyal to? As I told you, men in 16th century England and 11th century Scotland were really valued on their loyalty to the king. But what about men who are loyal to their family? Should they be just as respected? Should they be even more respected? I think Shakespeare's asking us to question loyalty and where we direct it. So there are some key quotes you can use from this scene. I really like Shakespeare's extended metaphor for birds. So, the first line of this scene, Lady Macduff says, "What has he done to make him fly the land?" Now, Macduff can't flap his arms and fly. He's not literally a bird. But metaphorically, the word fly, it's sometimes used as flight, is indicative of birds. We get specific mention of different species of birds. A wren is like a little bird. An owl is a bigger, not predatory bird. Bird is often used interchangeably with the noun phrase poor bird. So clearly birds are meant to be pitied. They're on the defenceless side. Maybe a little bit like Lady Macduff and her sons. They are being metaphorically represented by these sweet, innocent songbirds that unfortunately can easily be killed. And that sort of delicacy is really highlighted when the murderer, before he kills Macduff's son, calls him an egg. An egg is obviously an unborn bird, so imagine the idea of this murderer squashing an egg as he slays Macduff's son, and the cracking of the shell and the spilling of the yolk. So this extended metaphor serves to highlight the delicacy of Lady Macduff and her sons, but it's also a very accessible metaphor. So remember in the Globe Theatre, which was the theatre Shakespeare put on a lot of his plays in, there was sort of seated capacity at the top of the seating auditorium, and that would have been for the higher classes, people who are more intelligent perhaps, who were able to enjoy Shakespeare's philosophy and his witticism. But the standing capacity at the bottom were penny seats. They were really cheap. They were probably for the more working class, maybe the less intelligent, who would have really struggled to understand some of Shakespeare's loftier philosophical witticisms, but who would easily be able to access this metaphor of birds. Oh yeah, birds are delicate, eggs can be squashed. So I think the use of the extended metaphor creates imagery that is accessible for Shakespeare's entire audience. So he's really clever. He caters for the intelligent with his philosophical witticisms, and he caters for those who just sort of want a good time and to watch the play with his metaphors and accessible imagery. Lady Macduff says his flight was madness. Again, his flight is in reference to Macduff leaving Scotland for England. And again, that use of flight has very strong bird connotations, metaphorical. Lady Macduff also uses the word madness, which we know is a key theme. Now, madness in Macbeth has often been brought on as a form of punishment. So Macbeth has slayed King Duncan and he becomes mad as a result. Or Lady Macbeth has plotted the murder of King Duncan and she grows mad as a result. In this case, Macduff isn't mad, he's sane, and he's making good decisions for his country. So from Macduff's perspective, he's not mad. But what's interesting is from his wife's perspective, he is mad because he's made a decision that endangers her and their children. Ross tries to defend Macduff and he says, actually Macduff, he is noble, wise and judicious. If I were to memorise this quote, I would then focus on the adjectives noble. He has sort of honourable, good intentions, like a good ruler would. He is wise, that means he's able to assess a situation and make a good decision. And he's judicious. Judicious means you make good selected choices. Out of your 3 or 4 options, you choose the best one. So Ross clearly believes that Macduff's making the right decision. The murderer, when he enters the scene, announces to everyone that Macduff is a traitor. He is a traitor. This could mean a few things. He's a traitor to the throne of Scotland, which technically he is, because Macbeth is on the throne, and Macduff should be loyal to whoever is on the throne of Scotland. But you could also flip that and say he's not a traitor, he's actually trying to get rid of the traitor. The traitor is Macbeth, and Macduff is risking his own family's welfare to go to England and raise an army to actually get rid of the traitor Macbeth and restore the rightful king Malcolm to the throne. You could argue that he is a traitor means that he has betrayed his own family and left them vulnerable to this counterattack by Macbeth. So the word traitor here could have many connotations that you could explore in an exam if you want to. And when you do that, you might as well link it to the theme of treason and treachery. So, quote-wise, at the beginning of the video, I explained that Lady Macduff and her son exchanged some philosophical witticisms about fatherhood, marriage and treachery. I just want to explain 3 of them to you. If you're not interested in understanding these, feel free to skip to the end where you get your exam-style question. But if you do want to unpick some of these and gain a bit of knowledge from them, hang around with me a bit longer. So the first thing, the first philosophical witticism I picked up on is when Lady Macduff says to her son, "You have no father. Your father has left you. You are fatherless. What are you going to do about it?" And her son, I think it's really clever, says, "Don't worry, Mum, I will become a bird." And I believe this links to the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew in the Bible, where it says, "Why worry about tomorrow? Look at the birds. They don't sow any food, they don't work hard to farm, but yet there's always enough food for them and they live. How much more valuable are humans to God than birds?" So I think her son has actually stumbled upon a very good philosophy for life, which is don't worry. Turn to nature, do what nature does, don't worry about it. If I have no father who can't buy me food and cook for me, don't worry, I'll become a bird. I'll eat what the land provides. Her son has a very optimistic attitude to life, which I really respect. The second philosophical witticism is that the son starts questioning his mother. Now, I think this would have been quite unexpected at the time, and unheard of. The son says to the mother, well, you said I have no father, but it's worse for you because you have no husband. And Lady Macduff, instead of getting upset or breaking down about it, she responds back quite humorously. She says, don't worry about me. I'll just go to the market and I'll buy 20 more husbands. Maybe Lady Macduff is having a bit of a flex. I'm so beautiful and attractive, I can just get more husbands. Don't worry about me. Or maybe she's trying to reassure herself or reassure her son. But either way, the son comes back with a really witty remark. The son says, well, if you bought 20 husbands at the market, you'd just sell them again. And it's maybe Shakespeare is exploring the theme of loyalty within marriage. Like, if you can get that many husbands and wives, what's the point of being loyal to them? You might as well just dump them all and get a better one later on down the line. Whereas the son here is representing the idea of, well, you've chosen one husband, you should stick with them, you should be loyal. And for someone so young, I mean, the age is undetermined of the son, but we assume he's fairly young. He's incredibly wise. He knows that loyalty is good for society, is good for marriage, and he's actually chiding, he's telling his own mother off for being so flippant about her marriage to his father. Again, I have a lot of respect for the son, which makes it even more tragic when he's slayed a few minutes later. The final witticism I picked up on is Lady Macduff says that traitors are liars who should be hanged. So the son says, Mum, what is a traitor? And Lady Macduff says, well, a traitor is a liar. And the son says, well, what should we do to liars? And Lady Macduff says, well, we should hang liars as a form of punishment. And the son thinks about this for a minute, and he says, well, the liars and the traitors are idiots if they allow themselves to be hanged, because there are far more liars and evil people in the world than there are honest and good people in the world. Now, assuming the honest people hang the liars, and let's say there's 100 liars for every 10 honest men, why wouldn't the liars just be evil, like we know they are because they're liars, and just band together and kill all the honest men? And that sort of philosophy, that sort of thinking, stops Lady Macbeth in her tracks. Lady Macduff in her tracks. And it's actually a bit of a foreshadowing that maybe there are more evil people than there are good people in the world. And we know that's about to unfold because a couple of evil people in the shape of Macbeth's murderers are about to enter the scene and slay good people in the shape of the son, Lady Macduff, and Lady Macduff's other children. I'm really sorry if I've interchanged Macduff and Macbeth in this video analysis. Hopefully it's been clear when I've been referring to the Macduffs and the Macbeths. Okay, your exam style question, should you wish to answer it. First of all, I would make notes from this video on a physical copy of the play, and then I'd have a go at answering this. A student said Macduff is a traitor. How far do you agree with this statement? So with a question like this, how far do you agree? You have some choices. You can agree fully, you can partially agree, you can sort of be on the fence, you can agree/disagree, you could partially disagree, you could fully disagree. And as you write your answer, you want to get points, quotes, techniques, explanations, contextual knowledge in, as per usual. But you also want to have a sentence where you determine how far along the scale you are agreeing and why. You've got a few things to explore here. Is Macduff a traitor to Macbeth? Technically, yes, because he should be loyal to the King of Scotland. Is Macduff a traitor to the Scottish throne? Probably not, because he's willing to go and raise an English army to restore Malcolm, who's the rightful heir to the Scottish throne. Is Macduff a traitor to his family, as he betrayed them and left them vulnerable in their hour of need? Probably yes. So you've got at least 3 things you could explore here, and any other forms of treachery or treason or traitorous behaviour you could associate with Macduff from elsewhere in the play. Okie dokie. Well, if you found this video useful for your understanding of Macbeth, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing to my channel so you get the remainder of my Macbeth analysis videos, and feel free to leave a comment if you think I've missed out anything in this video. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you on the next one.